This is Art Sense, a podcast focused on educating and informing listeners about the past, present, and future of art. I'm Craig Gould. On today's episode, I speak with documentary filmmaker Sophie Chahinian, whose artist profile archive features one-on-one conversations and footage from the studios of some of the most iconic artists of our time, including the likes of David Salle, Yinka Shonibare, Charles Gaines, and Shirin Neshat. And now, inside the artist studio with filmmaker Sophie Chahinian. Sophie Chahinian, thank you so much for joining me today on the Art Sense podcast. Sophie, you're a documentary filmmaker. You love talking to artists. You've started the Artist Profile Archive, which is maybe that's a great first question, is you and tell me more about the Artist Profile Archive. A lot of times with artists, I have artists start with saying, if you're seated next to a perfect stranger at a dinner, in your case, maybe you're out in East Hampton at Guildhall Gala and you're seated next to somebody you've never met and they have no idea who you are. How do you explain to them what the Artist Profile Archive is and what you do?
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Craig. And I guess to that question, I'd just like to tell people that the Artist Profile Archive is a collection of short documentary films on artists talking about their work. And it's an ongoing project. People often like to ask, does the artist need to be alive? Yes, the artist does need to be alive. And it's just a way for people to learn about contemporary art, straight from the horse's mouth.
And so in a lot of ways, it's similar to what I do here. But, you have the benefit of actually presenting the moving visuals, multimedia kind of experience for the person that's wanting to hear it straight from the artist's mouth, right?
Exactly. But I'm jealous of your production time because you have the luxury of being able to turn things around more quickly. And I think it's a great collection that you've put together.
Thank you. And, same to you. I mean, these sorts of conversations, it really is, it is a reflection of your taste, right? I mean, you're curating a collection of voices that you think deserve to be heard, right? So how do you choose?
Well, on the one hand, there is an element of my choosing, but at the same time, there's often an element of serendipity involved as well. Sometimes things just lead one from the other kind of organically and naturally. I started out in graduate school and I started with some of the oldest artists who I thought would make for interesting interviews. And, as I wasn't able to secure their participation, it opened up to all kinds of artists who are just working today. And sometimes, sometimes artists are friends, and sometimes it's simply that I've made a discovery by attending an art fair or just discovering something new in Chelsea or Los Angeles or some other place, and following that interest to see where it goes. Oftentimes we do want to have an artist who has a solo exhibition at a gallery or a museum space because we do need quality B-roll that we shoot ourselves. Mm-hmm. So that becomes one of the necessary ingredients. But beyond that, it is, it does just kind of grow on its own at this point.
Do you find that a lot of artists refer you to other artists, or do you have artists reach out and say, I love what you did with this other artist. Would you be interested in talking? I mean, does it come from the artist end, or is it usually more of, studio teams and galleries and other people that are kind of driving those interactions?
I do wish that, Frank Stella would call me up and say, I love what you did. What are you doing on me? But that's not going to happen. And, that has even any other artist that has not happened that way for whatever reason. When we do things, for example, when we did a film for the Manil collection in Houston on Virginia Jaramillo.
Right.
The curator of that show called and said, we need something for the exhibition. Can you do a film on her? And there have been other instances in which we're commissioned by an entity, mostly museums, occasionally galleries, to make something for a specific exhibition or other kind of show. But a lot of times it's me having to pursue a lead or an interest and seeing if I can get the artist themselves interested, because a lot of times I find that working with a museum or a gallery, they don't come to you first. It's better to have the artist express the interest in participating to the gallery or the museum, because it doesn't really help for me to go to the gallery first. I've found that that's not as productive a way as talking to the artist first.
I used to have a different podcast where it was strictly studio visits, and I would go, and it was kind of regional artists to where I live, and I would go and record in the studio, still just audio, but just imagining what your studio visits are like, because it seems like you do want to speak to these artists in their working space. I'm curious about what it's like when you roll in with your microphone and your cameras and your collaborators and your lights, and then ask the artist, act like we're not here, act like, just pick back up what you were doing before we showed up. How do you make the artist comfortable enough in that situation for it to be authentic?
Well, we usually start with the interview, and then if we're lucky enough that the artist is willing to do a little work around us, that comes after we've had the hour or the hour and a half long conversation, so that it does feel very sort of spontaneous, because it is. And in the interviews, I always tell people that they will know all of the answers to the questions that I will ask them. And I start with the most basic thing, which is I ask them to state their name and their occupation. And part of the reason why I've always done that from the very beginning, because as you might have noticed, my name does not necessarily roll off one's lips, and it doesn't jump off the page either. So it does require a little guidance as to the pronunciation, which is why I'm very particular about all of the artists stating their own names. So when you start with that, your name and occupation, and then talking about your education, what was your first exposure to art, these are kind of like the entry questions. Mm-hmm. And it flows from there, and it just goes on. And by the time, we're with, like I said, hour and a half, after that, if we say, can you get up and give us some extra actions for B-roll, oftentimes they do want to do it. But I have to say that willingness to participate to that level is something that took a lot of experience on my part to even begin to ask, because when I first started doing these things, I was always trying to tell the artist that it was going to be the minimum amount of time. Right. They would just have to sit in a chair, answer a few questions, and we'd be gone.
Right.
Yeah. So fortunately, there's greater willingness to participate. And as a matter of fact, I think the best example of that is our most recently launched film on David Salle, right, which we shot all in London at the gallery where he had an exhibition and at his studio. And he was so willing to participate that that's part of the reason why that film turned out so well, is right, his level of participation as far as access, going to the gallery, doing a walk and talk, sitting in his studio, doing a seated interview, providing us with the archival photos. When it becomes a real collaboration in that regard, you really have a chance to do something really that becomes quite important to the artist.
I just imagine that once you have a successful implementation and collaboration with an artist like that, where you're able to see how much richer the viewing experience is, given what he was willing to share, I imagine it's easier to ask for that level of participation the next time, for the next artist, because they can see the reward there, right?
Exactly right. So, this happened slowly. We asked for some archival photos, and we got some really great archival photos. So then the next artist thought, okay, well, if I give some photos of me as a kid, then, that might work for them as well. So yeah, it kind of becomes these layers that you can access over time.
That film with David Heifer, I found it really intriguing because I love seeing process, and I love understanding process, and he does a great job of explaining how his work evolved. But there was a point in that film where I was a little nervous for a nonagenarian to be walking up a flight of stairs that didn't have a railing.
Well, good thing you didn't call the building inspector. It's so funny because David's studio is the top floor of his house. And his house that's probably the third staircase you have to climb in order to get there. And he just does it, without a thought. So it's really funny. And the reason, and the door is the floor. So when he opens the door, he can right up to the floor of the studio. I was shocked, Craig, how small his studio is, especially in light of how gigantic his work is. I mean,
Enormous.
It was really quite impressive.
Tell me, where all do these interviews take you? Because, it seems like some of these are LA centric, some are New York and Hamptons centric. But, these conversations are kind of taking you all over, right?
Yes. Yeah, they are. As a matter of fact, I just came back from Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I was interviewing Billy Zangewa, who has an exhibition at Site Santa Fe that just opened on Friday. And it'll be up until the middle of February. So, yes, there and actually I was able to shoot a film with Shirin Neshat in New Mexico as well. And then, of course, the film with David Heifer took place in London. So, New York, London, and LA tend to be the places where there are concentrated pockets of artists, and also great galleries and museums. So those are three kind of natural places where I happen to speak the language, and they work out well for contemporary art,
Tell me about collaboration, because, again, like we said, you don't just show up with a microphone in hand. I imagine you're bringing a team, and it's probably important to have people alongside you that you trust to get the story right and to get the visuals right. Can you talk a little bit about the folks that you collaborate with?
Yes, well, my primary collaborator is Matt Hindra. And we've done a lot of these films together. Matt has shot many of them. He's edited most of them. And we, in this instance, we did a film that is not strictly a profile. We did a film that's called The Making of Shirin Neshat's Land of Dreams. And we were able to go on location with Shirin and her filmmaking team and film behind the scenes. So Matt and I were able to go to New Mexico and do that. And honestly, had we not been working together for so many years before that, it would have been really difficult to do a project like that, because there are a lot of instances where you don't have the opportunity to plan something out, because we are just given access to whatever extent we are, and then we just have to make it work. And because we've worked together for so long, Matt already had a very good sense of what it was that I would want, and also what was going to cut together very well. And it was a very meaningful experience for us to work like that, because we often have the luxury of being able to plan something much in advance and then have it staged to our liking and that routine. But when you're working on a behind the scenes of a moving target like a film, then it's a completely different experience. So all of those years of experience together really came in handy And we were able to create a film that Shirin and Shoja, her partner, they really liked it. And they had it actually go around with the Land of Dreams exhibition to various museums actually around the world. So that's why that film has not joined the collection yet, because we were waiting for that exhibition series to be over. But now that it is, we will probably put that one on the website pretty soon. But that said, we are also working on a new profile on Shirin. So that's something that's in the editing stages now. But yes, so, that was a lot of fun because Matt and I, as I said, were on location in New Mexico with Shirin, but then we also got to go to Brooklyn and shoot her profile there. And she also has a wonderful filmmaking team who she has worked with a lot. But it's only in recent times that we've been able to add some more people to our list of collaborators, and we are slowly growing this, an A-team, as it were.
Let me ask you a question that you say you ask, the artists that you sit down with, and that is, what was your introduction to art? Where did all of this start? Because, obviously, you wouldn't be taking on this size of project if you weren't passionate about art. Where did your story start, and how did you get to the point where you made your first film?
Growing up in Los Angeles, which I did, Los Angeles County specifically, my aunts, my dad's sisters, often took me and my siblings to museums. And I think the first museum that I went to was the LA County Art Museum. And it was just, so many beautiful paintings all in one place. After that, I knew that I had an interest in, Impressionism or some art from artists who were long gone. But it wasn't until I had a serendipitous event take place, which was I ended up sitting next to an artist on an airplane once. And that was Eric Orr. And he was a California light and space artist. This was in the late 90s. And, I started talking to him, and I was in need of a job at the time. And, he said, you should come work at my studio. And to make a long story short, I did end up doing that for the last 15 months of Eric's life. And during that time, being in Venice Beach, California in the late 90s, there were all kinds of people there. Larry Bell, Ed Moses, Ed Ruscha, Ken Price, Lita Albuquerque. There are a lot of people in, on the west side of LA who were working at that time. And I noticed that when Eric spoke about his own work, it was so engaging and it was so accessible, and he helped you understand things in a way that didn't make you feel like you needed an education in order to appreciate. Because I did also feel, so then afterwards, once I did start working with him, I did start to feel this kind of elitism within the art world, where if you didn't have an education in art history and art making, you kind of felt like maybe you didn't have a right to be in the room. So I had been a philosophy major in undergrad, and having experienced that feeling of thinking I didn't have the right education for the job, I did go back to school. I went to graduate school for contemporary art, and I did the whole academic routine, the academic readings, the museum visits, the curator talks, all these kinds of things. And I thought, this is all very fascinating, but this is a different world from the world of listening to Larry and Ed and Eric chat about their work. And it made me feel that there's kind of an easier way to get an art education. It's a lot more fun, and it doesn't. You feel like you need these degrees behind your name in order to create and be a part of. And because I truly believe that art in general, but specifically contemporary art, is for everyone, and nothing is required beyond an interest. It's all there to be learned and experienced, and it's there for the taking if you want it. And I think this idea that art requires some grand gestures and some, a lot of academic endeavor in order to understand it's a terrible disservice that the art world has done to art to create this kind of these strata, of people who can have access to art and who can't. So I always say that the Arts Profile Archive is democratizing art education. It's a free way to get access to what artists say about their own work. And invariably, guess what? Artists don't speak academia.
Right.
They don't speak like curators. They don't speak like museum directors. They speak very accessibly, just like they're talking to, a regular person.
Right.
And I found that to be such a gift to be able to hear when I could hear the artists that I was exposed to, that I had access to, speak about their work. It was the most magical thing ever. And so I thought, if I can create something that is going to serve other people's curiosity and their desire for information, whether they're researching an artist for the first time or they're going to a gallery exhibition, they have 10 minutes to spend to find out what this artist is all about. Whatever it is, anything that we can do to enrich our experience of contemporary art is something that is very good for society. I truly believe that what contemporary art does in its own unique way is it helps us define the parameters of our human experience. And in doing so, we speak to the thing that binds us together and keeps us this cohesive human race. And let's just have that be the requirement. Let's not divide ourselves further down the line and come up with other divisions. Because at the end of the day, the only thing you need to be is a human being in order to get something out of contemporary art. And as a philosophy major, I was always searching for a framework to approach life and what are we here for? And I really think that is to help one another. And if we can do it in ways that bring people together and elucidate as I said, the parameters of our common human experience, there's nothing better than that. Because right now we're experiencing tremendous division and so many horrifying things. But I really do think that art sheds a tremendous light on the things that make life and our experiences, our interpersonal experiences, a lot more gratifying than other things can.
Your answer has so many nuggets of gold in there. I couldn't agree more. And it reminds me, recently, sometimes I will watch artist talks in preparation for a discussion I might have with a particular artist. And I was watching one a couple of weeks ago, leading up to an interview I was going to have with someone, and it was an artist talk that took place in front of a crowd of MFA students, and it was the artist, and it was two academics. There was like a tenured professor and a young postdoc, and maybe it was the location, but the academics, especially the young academic, it's like he was wanting to kind of prove his academia chops, and it was so painful to hear the academics go back and forth instead of just giving the artist the opportunity to speak in terms that we can all understand. And it's not like we have to dumb down. Just coming from a place of authenticity and truth, there's so much authenticity and truth in the best art. Allowing an artist to speak that truth is enough.
Yeah. No, that's a perfect example, Craig. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And to have to suffer through, not having the artists speak for themselves. I mean, that's a missed opportunity, isn't it?
Right.
For that audience to not be able to hear more of the artist speak, and to have to sit through. When you said painful, I was thinking painful parts of that panel. Yeah. Why do we have to have this? Why do we have to create these elitist kind of ideas in the art world? I often wonder, because there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between the artists who are so desirous of that connection. They are making the most authentic, as you say, offering that they have to offer fellow human beings. They want nothing more than for that art to be appreciated and seen, and to whatever extent that it can be understood, understood without a bunch of layers of, academic talk standing in the way.
Absolutely. And, it makes me think of the profile you did on Charles Gaines. I think I could listen to Charles Gaines talk for another hour.
Charles Gaines, I love him. And his work is amazing. And he speaks so, I mean, he's to me seems like one of the smartest artists and even people that I've ever had the privilege to talk to. And, but I'll tell you what, Matt and I had that edit took a long time, because we did have to kind of strip it down, strip what Charles was saying down into these digestible sentences, and show the work, and make it very understandable, because Charles, I believe, he's just operating on a different level than the rest of us. I mean, he's completely fascinating. And of course, he's, a professor. I don't know if he still is a professor, but he definitely was a professor. And he's had so many amazing students. But yeah, I'm glad you liked that one.
I did.
I felt like that was, I feel like a lot of people have said that they didn't necessarily understand where he was coming from until they saw that interview.
Your list of folks that you've talked to is amazing. Which ones stick with you? Which ones, are not only memorable but meaningful for you?
Craig, come on, you know what that's like. That's like asking somebody who their favorite child is. Parents don't have favorites.
Yes, however, there is one name on the list that I think you could get a pass for saying maybe it was right.
Maybe you're right. Yes, that's true. You're talking about Robert Longo, right?
Right. So it was a little bit of a life-changing conversation, that I would assume, right?
Yes. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was, absolutely. And that was the first time that I had really talked to him. That was the first conversation, basically.
Tell us more about what's blossomed there, because I'm not sure people know the full story of what happened after Harry met Sally.
Well, I don't know that anybody knows that Harry did meet Sally, but in any case, I had studied Robert Longo in graduate school, and along with Eric Fischel and Cindy Sherman and a bunch of other artists. But when I saw Robert's Gang of Cosmos show at Metro Pictures, I think that was in 2015, maybe. That just blew my mind. I mean, he was already on the list, and he was somebody that I thought would be very significant. And when I saw that show, I was completely blown away. I don't know if you know it, but it was the show that he did as an homage to abstract expressionists who really influenced him. And he had done, the black and white translations of everybody from, Rothko to Gorky to, whomever, Joan Mitchell, and et cetera. But it took a long time. It took a long time to get him to sit down for an interview. So there were a matter of years in between. And, but finally when he did, we had a great conversation. And that was at the end of 2016. 17, and I wasn't always in the habit of using two camera operators. But in that case, I thought, you know what, we definitely have to have two camera operators. I mean, this is a big deal. And we had already filmed Robert's show at the Brooklyn Art Museum. And I had already gone to London to see the show that he did with Tadeusz Ropak in London earlier in 2017. So we had a lot of footage. I even had footage of that show, the Gang of Cosmos show. So we had tons of footage already, you know, but because he had in maybe 20 at some point with the Strike the Sun show at Petzl Gallery, which was concurrent to the Gang of Cosmos show, he had done a book signing, and I went to that and I told him about the Artist Profile Archive, and I asked him if he would participate, and he said, yeah, that sounds interesting, I'll do it. But then I couldn't get anywhere with his studio.
Right.
They just wouldn't give me, you know. But you know, a couple of years went by, and then finally I saw him at another one of his openings, and I said, you know, you had said you were going to do that. You would do the interview, and he said, yeah, I remember. And he said, okay, you know. I said, how do I get through your studio? He said, well, just tell them that, you know, you saw me, and I said I'll do it, and that, and yeah, so we finally got it on the books, and I kept thinking, oh man, I hope he cancels. I hope he postpones it. I mean, it was like, you know, 6 days before Christmas or something like that. It was snowing. Matt and I were going to be driving out from East Hampton and all this, and I thought, and I was so nervous, I just thought it might be better if we just push this off until next year. But he kept the date and the time, and at the end of it, well, before we really got to the end of it, he said, you know, I really have to go. I have a Knicks game that I'm going to see. But if you need anything else, you know, let me know, and you can come back anytime. And it just went from there.
There you go.
What can I say? I can't give too many details away, right, Craig?
I understand. So, you know, there are some conversations with artists where I know their work, and I've been following their work, and it's easy for me to ask questions. Then there are other artists that, you know, their oeuvre is, you know, 60 years, and how can I be prepared enough to ask the right questions? And then there are other artists who are so new to the art world that there's really hardly any research I can do. And you're bound to have these same anxieties, you know, trying to know how to prompt these people and taking the most advantage of the precious time that they've given you the opportunity to have with them, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, fortunately, and I'm sure you feel the same, but the longer we do this, the less frequently we get that anxiety. Mm-hmm. But it is sometimes still there. And I always do wonder, you know, will I have enough time? Will I be asking the right questions? Will we have enough of a rapport where it's not like pulling teeth? You know, will there be that nugget that has not been revealed before? You know, that's the other thing, is that when there is an artist who has a long, you know, decades-long career, they obviously have lots of videos up and lots of articles and lots of, you know, secondary source material. And you read all of that because at the end of the day, you want one unique thing that they're going to say in your interview, right?
Absolutely.
Isn't that how you feel?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's how I always feel. Like, am I going to be able to ask the one question that's going to get them to say something they haven't said before? Mm-hmm. You know, for these veteran artists who do have a lot of canned answers, it's incredibly gratifying when you can get to that point, but it's also very nerve-wracking trying to get there.
I totally get it. So what's on the horizon? Where do you see it going? In your heart of heart, in your vision of what this will become, who is it benefiting in the end? You know, does it continue to live where it does? Does it become something bigger? You know, do you compile and make something feature length? Or are there particular artists that you have on a hit list that you know just have to get into the archive at some point? What do you hope the horizon has in store for you?
I think that because what I really want is for the archive to grow faster than just me and Matt making films. It needs to have more collaborators, and I would like it if we could build teams of people all over who are creating these films in the same format. Because, you know, as you gave the example of watching the panel discussion on the artist, and also how many films there are on YouTube that don't have very good production value. They don't have the good audio. They haven't been cut. They're just a panel discussion. And it's not, and it takes 50 minutes to get 5 minutes of information. I want the artist profile archive to become a known quantity where people know to go if they have 10 to 15 minutes and they want to get a lot of information and they want to see the artist and they want to be able to have some idea of the work and answer some basic questions, but also dive a little bit deeper and give some extra information that you would not be getting elsewhere. So in order for us to grow, we're just going to have to work with more people. And I'm not exactly sure how that happens, but I do feel like we're getting somewhere. And eventually the path will be revealed. That's the way it always has been, is that the path just continues to get revealed and one thing leads to another. But that said, another project that I am working on, which is very dear to my heart, is a documentary film on Metro Pictures Gallery. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we started shooting a little bit of, I guess it was 2 years ago, and that we are hopefully going to be spending a lot of time on this winter, talking to a lot of people who not only participated in Metro Pictures, but also, just knew it as a gallery that they visited and what kind of impact it had, not only on the New York art scene, but everywhere. And that's hopefully going to be, a longer format film. So these things happen organically, by working with artists. You find these galleries that you grow to love, and when it suddenly goes out, you want to explore the reasons how and why that happened. So that's what the Metro Pictures film will be addressing.
So if people wanted to follow, if they wanted to support, if they wanted to benefit from the work you've done, where's the best place to follow you? Is it the website, the artistprofilearchive.com, or is it social media, YouTube? Where's the best place for folks to engage with you?
Well, I think that because the website, theartistprofilearchive.com, is a multimedia platform as opposed to our channel on YouTube, which is only the videos, we actually work with writers and we commission them to write original biographies, short format biographies that accompany every artist's video. And then we have a lot of unique content as far as behind the scenes photos that include some images of the artist's studio and some other things that we were not able to include in the final cut. And we even have audio of each film, so that if you want to just listen to it while you're doing something else, we have the audio file available on the website as well. But I can't really explain why this is happening, but a month ago we had about 5,000 followers on Instagram, and right now we have 16.5 thousand followers on Instagram.
Look at you go.
It's the weirdest thing. I know. And I think it's because of the David Heifer film. We put up this really great clip, and we've never gotten this much of a reaction. I mean, he has over 16,000 likes on the clip that we put, and it just keeps getting shared. And even our YouTube following went from like 1.1 thousand, I think we're up to 2.3 or 2.4 thousand right now. So anywhere that people, whatever it is, wherever their interest lies, do they just want to watch some fun short reels under a minute long? Well, that's what our Instagram account does. And if you just want to watch videos, please visit the YouTube channel. But if you want the full picture of what it is that we do, then you really have to go to the website, because that's where you're going to be able to get, more photos, more things to read, and some other, newsletter. The newsletter that we send out is something that you can subscribe to on the site. It only comes out about 4 times a year, but when it does have information on it. It tells you what we've just launched, what is to come, and what some of the artists from the archive are doing as far as exhibitions right now. So it's a very informative newsletter that comes out about once a quarter, and people can sign up for that on our website. And I'm also going to mention that we are going to, for better or for worse, we're going to be adding that donate button to the website pretty soon. We just have been, we just got approved by Fractured Atlas, and they are our nonprofit fiscal sponsor. So that's kind of exciting, which I hope is going to help us grow our collaborative team of filmmakers so that we can add films a lot faster to the archive than we have been able to so far.
Well, you're doing good work, Sophie. And so I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk to me about this amazing work, these amazing voices. It's exactly the kind of content I love to consume. And, I wish you the best of luck, and, hope sky's the limit for you.
Thank you so much, Craig. That means a lot to me, because I do feel like, you and I we're kindred spirits. We're doing something very similar. And it sounds like we have similar ambitions for what art can achieve. And the more people we have doing this, hopefully together we do achieve our goals. And I know that you know how much effort goes into all of these things. That's why I really appreciate you including me in your collection.
Well, my pleasure. That's all the time we have for this week. You've been listening to Art Sense. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. If you've enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe. And while you're there, please rate the show and leave a quick review. Your feedback is the key to other folks finding us. And if you'd like to see images related to the conversation, read the transcript, and find other bonus features, you can go to Cambia.art and click on the podcast tab. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can email me at craig@cambia.art. Thanks for listening.